Welcome. What you are about to watch is not science fiction, and it is not folklore. It is a serious investigation into one of history's most compelling unresolved questions: the mystery of the wandering rocks, the stones that move across the desert by themselves. Across the world, in universities, research institutes, and field excavations, serious scholars are wrestling with evidence that does not fit the accepted story. Evidence that has been documented, measured, and peer-reviewed, and that still has no satisfying conventional explanation. We are going to look at that evidence carefully, without prejudice in either direction, not dismissing what is extraordinary, but not accepting it without scrutiny either. The truth, as always, is in the details. On a remote dry lake bed in Death Valley, California, rocks move by themselves. Not just pebbles, boulders weighing up to 300 kilograms drag themselves across the flat mud, leaving trails up to 260 meters long behind them. Some trails run straight, some curve, some rocks turn corners. Two rocks start side by side and end up heading in opposite directions. No one had ever seen it happen. The phenomenon was first documented scientifically in the 1940s. For the next 70 years, geologists, physicists, and curious amateurs proposed explanations ranging from magnetic fields to algal mats to sheer wind to something that could not be named. The rocks became famous. The mystery became an industry. And then in 2014, two researchers named Richard and James Norris did something no one had managed to do in 7 decades. They watched it happen. The explanation, when it came, required no magnets, no microbes, no mysteries, but it required a set of conditions so precise and so rare that they had been missed for 70 years. What were they? This is where our investigation begins. Stay with us, because the further we go into the evidence, the more extraordinary it becomes. The story you think you know is only the surface. Beneath it lies something far more remarkable. Let us begin. Before we examine the specific evidence, we need to step back and understand the context. This case does not exist in isolation. It sits within the landscape of modern documented mysteries, and to properly evaluate what we are looking at, we need to understand the broader picture that surrounds it. Governments keep secrets. This is not a conspiracy theory. It is documented fact, confirmed by declassified archives, freedom of information disclosures, and the confessions of officials long after the events in question. The United States government ran secret programs to test psychedelic drugs on unwitting civilians, culture, to spy on its own citizens, COINTELPRO, and to cover up nuclear testing incidents that killed American soldiers. The British government suppressed information about UFO encounters by military personnel for decades. The Soviet Union systematically falsified scientific data to maintain ideological conformity. None of this means that every government secret involves supernatural phenomena or alien contact. The reality of classified programs is almost always more mundane. Military technology being tested covertly, intelligence operations that cannot be publicly acknowledged, or simply the bureaucratic instinct to classify first and justify later. Most UFO sightings that turn out to have official explanations were classified aircraft. Most government denials of anomalous phenomena are straightforwardly honest. The phenomena being denied are simply not real. But the documented history of government secrecy has a practical effect on investigative credibility. When officials deny knowledge of events that witnesses describe in compelling detail, that denial cannot be taken at face value without independent corroboration. The proven track record of institutional concealment means that institutional denial, however authoritative it sounds, is not the same as evidence of absence. This complicates every modern mystery that touches on official narrative. This context matters because it tells us something important. What we are about to investigate is not an isolated curiosity. It is part of a pattern that researchers in multiple fields have been independently documenting for decades. And patterns in science demand explanation. With that foundation in place, let us now turn to the specific case at hand. Now we reach the heart of the matter. The core evidence surrounding the wandering rocks, the stones that move across the desert by themselves, is more extensive more verified, and more troubling for conventional explanations than most people realize. Let us walk through it systematically, fact by fact, and allow the evidence to speak for itself. We are not going to speculate here. Every point that follows is documented in peer-reviewed publications, official archaeological records, or government archives that are publicly accessible. The question is not whether these facts are real. The question is what they mean. Consider this first extraordinary detail. Racetrack Playa is a flat, dry lake bed in Death Valley National Park, California, situated at an altitude of 130 meters and measuring approximately 5 kilometers by 2 kilometers. The surface is cracked, dried mud of extraordinary flatness. Elevation varies by less than 1 centimeter across most of the playa. Several hundred rocks are scattered across the surface, ranging from small pebbles to boulders weighing up to 318 kilograms. This single data point, if taken in isolation, might be set aside. Anomalies happen, instruments malfunction, researchers make mistakes. But as we continue, you will see that this is not an isolated anomaly. It is part of a consistent and documented pattern. But that is only the beginning. Researchers also discovered each rock on the playa has left a clearly visible trail in the dried mud behind it, furrows of disturbed surface that record the rock's path across the lake bed. Some trails run for up to 260 meters. Some are perfectly straight, others curve, loop, or change direction. Several parallel trails indicate rocks moving simultaneously in the same direction. The trails persist for years in the dry desert conditions before weathering away. Now, a skeptic might propose an alternative explanation for this, and that is entirely reasonable. We should always test alternative explanations before accepting extraordinary ones. The problem is that the alternative explanations, when examined carefully, create more problems than they solve. The mystery deepens when we examine. The phenomenon was first formally documented in 1948 by geologists Jim McAllister and Alan Agnew in a publication of the California Division of Mines. Subsequent decades saw numerous proposed explanations, including magnetic anomalies, dust devils, gravitational effects, and algal biofilms reducing friction. None was confirmed by direct observation. No researcher had witnessed the rocks in motion in the 70 years following first documentation. This is where the conventional account begins to strain. Each individual fact might be dismissed or minimized in isolation. But the cumulative weight of the evidence is another matter entirely. Perhaps most remarkable of all, Richard Norris, a paleobiologist at the Scripps Institution of Oceanography, and his cousin James Norris began a systematic study in 2011. They installed a weather station on the playa and attached GPS loggers to 15 rocks. They also set up time-lapse cameras capable of capturing movement. The equipment ran continuously for 2 years before the critical events occurred. Researchers who have examined this evidence have described it as genuinely difficult to explain within the accepted framework. These are not fringe commentators. They are credentialed academics publishing in mainstream journals, raising questions that the field has not yet satisfactorily answered. Then there is the matter of, in December 2013 and January 2014, Richard Norris was present on the playa during move-in events and directly observed rocks in motion for the first time in recorded history. The conditions he documented: several centimeters of water on the playa from recent rainfall, overnight temperatures dropping below freezing to form a thin layer of ice, morning sunlight breaking the ice into floating panels, and light winds of 3 to 5 meters per second sufficient to push the ice panels, carrying the rocks with them. What makes this particularly significant is its independence from the previous points. This is not a case of one theory requiring another. These are separate lines of evidence converging on the same uncomfortable conclusion. Adding to the enigma is this finding: the GPS data showed rocks moving at speeds between 2 and 5 meters per minute during the observed events, slow enough to be invisible without patient observation, fast enough to leave clear trails in the soft, wet mud beneath the ice. The results were published in the journal PLOS 1 in August 2014. The mechanism requires a precise and rare combination of rain, ice, sunlight, and wind that occurs perhaps once every few years at Racetrack, Playa. Taken together, these facts form a pattern that cannot be explained by coincidence, misidentification, or methodological error. Each piece of evidence has been examined by skeptics. Each has been subjected to alternative explanations. And in each case, the alternative explanation falls short of accounting for everything that has been documented. We are left with a body of evidence that demands explanation and an accepted narrative that does not provide one. This is where serious inquiry begins. Now that we have established the evidence, we need to examine the theories that researchers have proposed to explain the wandering rocks, the stones that move across the desert by themselves. This is where the debate becomes most intense, because the theories reflect not just different interpretations of the same evidence, but fundamentally different assumptions about what is possible and what the past looked like. Understanding these theories is not just an academic exercise. Each one has been championed by serious researchers with genuine credentials, and each one captures something that the others miss. The truth, if it is ever established, will likely draw on elements of several. The first major explanation proposed by researchers holds that Richard Norris and James Norris confirmed the ice panel mechanism in 2014. Thin sheets of ice form on the shallow flooded playa after winter rain, break up in morning sunlight, and are pushed by light winds across the wet mud surface, carrying rocks with them. The rocks do not need to be frozen into the ice. They merely rest on the wet mud beneath it and are dragged by the moving ice. The objection that had stalled earlier researchers was simply the rarity of the required conditions, which meant no one had been present when it happened. This interpretation has significant academic support and is backed by substantial evidence, but it is not without problems. Critics point out that it requires assumptions that go beyond what the evidence strictly supports, and that key predictions of this theory have not been confirmed by subsequent research. It remains contested, and the contest is productive. A rival school of thought argues that an earlier competing hypothesis proposed that wind acting directly on rocks resting on wet, slippery mud could move them without ice. This was partially supported by laboratory experiments showing that wet playa mud has very low friction. The Norris observations did not entirely exclude wind on mud as a secondary mechanism for the smallest rocks, but the ice panel model better explains the movement of large boulders that direct wind alone cannot plausibly shift. This theory is controversial, and deliberately so. Its proponents argue that the evidence demands an explanation outside the conventional framework. Critics counter that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that the evidence presented, while suggestive, does not yet meet that standard. The debate continues in peer-reviewed literature. Perhaps the most unconventional theory suggests that bacterial or algal biofilms producing a slippery coating on the playa surface could reduce friction enough for wind to move rocks. A hypothesis proposed in the 1990s and tested by examining playa mud composition. Biological films were found, but their contribution to rock movement was not confirmed as sufficient by experimental testing, and the Norris 2014 observations did not support biofilm as a primary mechanism. What is striking about this debate is not merely that experts disagree. That is normal and healthy in science. What is striking is the quality of the disagreement. Serious researchers working from the same body of evidence, reaching genuinely different conclusions. That level of fundamental disagreement, when it persists over decades, is a signal that something important has not yet been understood. The question is not which of these theories is right. The question is whether any of them is right, or whether the truth is something that none of the current frameworks has yet been able to capture. The case surrounding the wandering rocks, the stones that move across the desert by themselves, does not rest on speculation alone. What distinguishes this investigation from pure mythology is the existence of documented, physical, verifiable evidence. material that has been examined by credentialed researchers and whose authenticity is not seriously disputed. What is disputed is its interpretation. Let us review the most significant documented evidence as objectively as possible. We are not going to cherry-pick the data that supports a preferred conclusion. We are going to lay out what exists and let you draw your own assessment. Physical evidence supporting this account includes the Norris GPS data from 15 instrumented rocks constitutes direct empirical evidence of the ice panel mechanism. The loggers recorded multiple movement events between December 2013 and January 2014, with movement speeds of 2 to 5 meters per minute, matching the observed wind speeds and ice behavior. The GPS tracks show the rocks stopping and starting in patterns consistent with the formation and breakup of ice panels rather than with continuous wind action. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Investigators have documented time-lapse camera footage captured during the 2013-2014 events shows the thin ice sheet visibly moving across the Playa surface and the rocks moving with it. This is the first visual documentation of the sailing stone phenomenon in motion after approximately 70 years of unsuccessful attempts to record it. The footage was published alongside the PLOS One paper and has since been widely viewed. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. On-site analysis revealed the Playa conditions required for rock movement, a few centimeters of standing water, sub-zero overnight temperatures, morning sunshine, and light wind, are independently confirmed by the Playa weather station data. The rarity of this precise combination explains why no observer recorded the phenomenon for 7 decades, despite the site's fame. The phenomenon is not rare in principle. The witnessing of it was rare by chance. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Each individual piece of evidence might, in principle, be explained away. A single anomalous artifact might be misidentified. A single anomalous date might reflect contamination. A single anomalous eyewitness account might reflect misperception. The question is whether all of the evidence can be explained away, and whether the explanations required are more or less plausible than the evidence itself. When multiple independent lines of inquiry converge on the same conclusion, that convergence is the most powerful signal in empirical science. And that is exactly what we are seeing here. We have examined the history, the evidence, and the theories surrounding the wandering rocks, the stones that move across the desert by themselves. Now we need to ask the question that is sometimes overlooked in discussions of ancient mysteries. Why does this matter? What does it mean for us today? It would be easy to file this away as an interesting historical curiosity, a puzzle from a distant past with no bearing on our present lives. That would be a fundamental mistake. The questions raised by this case touch on issues that are directly relevant to who we are, where we came from, and what the human story actually looks like before the period covered by conventional history. The Norris 2014 paper resolved the sailing stones mystery after approximately 70 years of speculation. The mechanism is now well established. A combination of water, ice, sunlight, and wind that occurs infrequently but is entirely natural. Similar moving rock phenomena have since been identified on other flat playas in the American Southwest and elsewhere. Racetrack Playa remains a popular, if remote, destination in Death Valley. It requires a 27-kilometer drive on unpaved road to reach. The trails persist in the mud for years and are clearly visible to visitors. The mystery lasted so long not because the mechanism was complex, but because no one was present during the rare moments it occurred. Furthermore, the tools available to investigate these questions are advancing rapidly. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, ancient DNA analysis, isotopic tracing, and deep-sea sonar are all providing capabilities that previous generations of researchers could only dream of. Cases that were genuinely unresolvable 10 years ago are now open to new analysis, and the findings, consistently, are expanding rather than contracting the mystery. The investigation continues. New discoveries are being made. New analyses are being published. New voices are entering the conversation from disciplines that were not previously part of the discussion. The answers, when they come, and they will come, will not merely solve a historical puzzle. They will force a fundamental revision of assumptions that underpin our entire understanding of human history and human potential. We have now walked through the complete case of the wandering rocks, the stones that move across the desert by themselves, from the historical record, through the physical evidence, across the competing theories, and into the modern significance of what remains unresolved. What the story of sailing stones ultimately reveals is not just a historical puzzle. It is a mirror. It reflects our assumptions back at us, our assumptions about what ancient people were capable of, about how knowledge is gained and lost across the centuries, and about the relationship between what we know and what we merely think we know. The evidence presented in this documentary is real. The questions it raises are genuine. The debate among researchers is ongoing, and that is healthy. Science is not a set of conclusions. It is a process. And the process requires that we remain open to evidence that challenges what we thought we knew, however uncomfortable that challenge might be. If you came to this documentary as a skeptic, we hope the evidence gave you something to think about. If you came as a true believer, we hope the critical examination gave you a more nuanced picture. The truth, as always, lies in the evidence, not in what we want to be true. Thank you for watching. If this investigation sparked your curiosity, please subscribe to the channel. We publish new documentaries every week, covering the full range of historical mysteries that the mainstream has not yet adequately explained. Leave a comment below telling us which case you want us to investigate next. The conversation continues. The investigation never ends.